A lot of people say, well, if it hadn't been for the war, Tsarist Russia was on an evolutionary path. It was modernizing economically.
Yeah.
So it might have been a kind of Taiwan story over time where the dictatorial regime gave way under economic success and political pressure to a more benign regime, and they institutionalized a rule of law, private property, civil liberties, inclusive polity for everybody. And the problem with that is that the autocracy refused to do that. The autocracy wanted no part of any evolutionary process. So in 1905, when the Tsarist regime is compelled under pressure of tremendous peasant revolt and worker strikes and a defeat in the war against Japan, when they're compelled to introduce some version of constitutional order, a kind of quasi-parliament, quasi-constitution, the Tsar regrets doing this almost immediately and is trying to push back against his concessions once the lid was put back on because of repression, once Dornovo repressed successfully the political movement. The Tsar wants to undo those concessions and go back to being an autocrat. An autocrat, autokrator, means a self-power, a power unto itself. And so this is your challenge. How do you undo the autocracy and get to an evolutionary mode when the autocracy itself is committed to not allowing any political participation whatsoever? And so you have the leftist version of overthrow, where you end up with a radicalization in the leftist direction. And you have a rightist version of overthrow, where you end up in a kind of, oh, we're not going to have Leninism here. Let's prevent Leninism. Let's go with the radical right. So the traditional right invites, as happened in the German case and earlier in the Italian case, invites the radical right to power, thinking they can control the radical right, the fascism, the Nazism. The traditional right is wrong. The radical right, once it's invited to power, institutionalizes itself. So you get a leftist version of this and a rightist version of this, and then they're kind of codependent, where each uses the threat of the other to further consolidate their dictatorship. So this is the 20th century version. The irony here is that you got the radical right, the fascist solution in the German case, and you got the radical left, the socialist solution in the Tsarist case. The Tsarist regime had a massive radical right. They had the Protocols of the Elders of Zionism, that infamous tract, anti-Semitic tract, which then makes its way to Germany but originates in the Tsarist Empire. So the anti-Semitism is there. The right-wing movement is there, implanted in villages, the union of the Russian people. Russia has the fascism before Germany. Germany has the largest socialist party in its parliament, in the sense that it's not a majority, but it's a plurality. Right. The Social Democrats in Germany are enormously successful at the ballot box. And the right-wing movement with the anti-Semitism is enormously successful in the streets in Tsarist Russia. So if you were alive before 1917, 1933, you would predict that the socialism would be victorious, would triumph in Germany, and the fascism would triumph in the Russian Empire. But it's the opposite.
Yes. If you enjoyed this clip, you can watch the full episode here and subscribe for more clips. Thanks.